boot cleaning again, and you will notice that there's actually two sets of boots, and that's because there's two stories, but we're only going to tell the story around this pair of boots. So these pair of boots can go down there and they'll feature in the next story. So we're just in here doing a bit of cleaning, but I thought I'd just let you know what I've been up to. Now, some of you know what I've been up to, some of you know where I've been, and some of you probably know that I come from a seaside resort, and consequently I quite like being on the beach among the sand. But sometimes I just feel I have to take that sand experience to the extremes. And that's what we're going to have a look at. Now, I don't really have enough clips to make a proper rolling video like I do. So this is going to be a little bit of a montage of video clips, some photos maybe. But the truth is that I was on an educational trip. I was learning about how to survive in extreme conditions. And consequently, I was not getting my camera out every 5 minutes because I was educating myself. And so I didn't have time for all that strutting and posing in front of the camera, pretending to be the big explorer. No. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look and just show you some of the stuff I've been up to. And I decided that before this all started I might need a little holiday. So I went off on this trip 3 days earlier than everybody else. And I like to think I do my research when I go on holiday. But in this particular case, things didn't go quite according to plan. Firstly, one would think that booking a hotel in a nice place would be relatively simple. Booking a taxi to take you from the airport to the hotel, straightforward. No, not the case. First mistake, looking on Google Earth to see where the hotel was. Well, the one thing that I had forgotten from experience many years ago was that the streets I was looking at were no bigger than a hotel corridor, some of them. And the other thing that caught me out was I expected the taxi driver to know where the hotel was. Did he know where it was? Did he, hell? Bloody useless. So let's take a look at where he did drop me off. So we're in this big square here, and he drops me off right at the far side, way out of where we're looking at here. And he said, go to the square and turn right. Right, I can understand simple instructions. Well, the bit of this square that I'm showing you, it's twice as big as that, and I turned right. I was dragging my suitcase, I had a pack on my back, it was 40 degrees plus, 3/4 of an hour, and it was only down to my brilliance at navigation that I managed to find this place. So let's just take a little look at a couple of the streets I had to go down. And I can honestly say that at that point, when this little bit of film has been shown, I hadn't got a clue where I was. Well, I did. I knew within 200 or 300 yards, but to find this hotel, now it's not a hotel, it's called a riad, which is a converted family home. And yeah, did we get there? Let's take a look. eventually, after negotiating the donkeys, the tourists, I finally made it down this little back alley, and this is the hotel. We're just coming up to the door. Doesn't look anything special, does it? And to be fair, it isn't. It's basic, but when you get inside, it's really quaint. And once settled in, it was just a case of enjoying the delights of Marrakesh for the next 3 days. Marrakesh, this is where the journey starts. Had our last comfortable night in the hotel, nice shower, nice food, and now all we've got to look forward to is Jason's menu that he's provided for us. It was going to take 2 days to get to where we were going, which was to the south of Morocco, and that would be our training area, an area which we will cover about 100 miles from one end to the other. Obviously we had to stop on the way, so if you take a look at this is our first overnight camp, and as you can see we have very basic facilities. Each person brought their own tent, so you had your own little private space to retreat to if required. And the next day we proceeded on, and the training area, if you take a look at this map, you can see highlighted at the bottom of the page is potential stopover places with some of the desert wells marked. Now we were going to be guided by a local who was very familiar with the area, who, I'm not sure what his name really was, but I was told it sounded like Aberdeen, so everybody called him Aberdeen. Whether that's right or not, I still don't know. So we're going to enter that area, and then we're going to start various training exercises. But I think the first thing we'll take a look at is, before we got too far into it, our great leader Jason had decided he was going to take us on a camel trek. Now, I've sat on a camel for about half an hour, and it's not what you'd call the most comfortable place to sit. His idea was we'd go for 4.5 hours on this camel. Well, it all went well until... my saddles broke. So I'm on foot now. Nothing like a morning stroll in the Sahara on foot under the beating sun. My old girl up ahead, no passenger. Well, it didn't take long for me to find that I was just looking at the arse end of the last camel as it flicked its tail backwards and forwards. And I thought, I don't want to look at this all the way back to camp. And it was probably only about half a mile then to back to where we were camped up for the night. So in my infinite wisdom, I decided I'd jog. Now, anybody with any amount of desert experience and common sense will tell you you don't want to be jogging in 43 degrees midday sun in the Sahara Desert. But I do like a challenge. So off I went, jog, walk. And before you knew it, I was back at the camp. And there was a bit of a reason. I thought I could maybe get a shot of the camels coming back in, which, as you can see, I did.
Hey. Yeah, very short.
So, camels are back, everybody's dismounted. Take a look at the guy over to the right when he gets off his camel. I don't think that's his natural walk. Anyway, activities for the rest of the day. What are we going to do? Well, they're going to do stuff like digging holes in the sand to shelter from sandstorms, digging more holes to try and obtain water. Just basically a lot of digging in the hot sun. But I got out of that. And how did I do that? Well, jogging with camels, as I said, not a good idea, because I suddenly realised, and from experience I knew what was happening. I was going down with heat exhaustion, possibly heat stroke. So I went and had a word with Jason, explained the situation. I needed to get my body temperature down. And I was sent to sit under a tree with lots of water. And yeah, I didn't feel 100%, but it was quite enjoyable. Watching the rest of them out in the midday sun, digging holes and sweating, and yeah. But I did show an interest. I did wander over at the end when they'd finished to have a look at the results of what they'd achieved. So you could say that I wasn't a very active participant on that afternoon. But by the morning I'd recovered and everything was back to normal, and we could get on with the next task at hand. Now, for the second part of this story, you may notice that I have retreated to the comfort of my central heating. That's because it was starting to get a bit cold outside after the sun went down, and so I finished cleaning those boots, and here I am, because I'm a bit of a wimp sometimes, and yeah, after you've been in the Sahara, sitting out there in the greenhouse doesn't seem quite as warm. Anyway, here we are, we're in my office. Well, I say office, it's actually the dining room, but you know, I like to say office because it makes me sound sort of more professional, don't you think? Yeah. Anyway, back to the story. What were we actually doing on these exercises? Well, there was all sorts of things. We were doing some navigation, some day navigation, we did some night navigation, had some stars, studying the stars, we're making fires, building the shelters, as you've seen a little bit of, and there were other things that we ended up doing for real. First thing to point out is that vehicle we were in, and we had two vehicles, and this is probably very important when you go off into these places, to always have two vehicles. And it paid dividends, did that, because when we first entered the desert, we'd only gone a few hundred metres and the lights started flashing on the dash and it went into limp mode, and fortunately we were able to turn round, go back into the village where Aberdeen had his contacts, and well, I won't say they fixed the issue. What they did was something that's dear to my heart. I've been seeing doing this on one of my sailing videos when confronted by warning alarms. Get a pair of pliers and just cut the wires, which I think is what happened, because they didn't fix the sensor that was causing the problem, they just disconnected it. Anyway, off we went. And another thing we encountered a couple of hours into the desert was, well, we had a tyre failure. But we didn't just have one tyre failure, we had two tyre failures. And it became apparent that we couldn't afford to lose another one. So, we decided we'd have to change them both. And if you take a look here again at the clip, you can see the lads digging out the wheel. The reason they were digging out the wheel, I mean, all we had was a little bottle jack, totally inadequate. And getting the vehicle raised high enough was difficult, and we had to dig out underneath the wheel to get the wheel on and off. And Aberdeen, well, he had to drive 2 hours back to the village and get it sorted out, and 2 hours back, which left us just with the one vehicle. But that was fine because we had plenty of water.
Right, lower it down a bit. Yeah.
Another thing you always have to be prepared to deal with in the desert is getting stuck. So this was an important part of the tuition we received. I've had experience before of getting stuck in sand, and as long as you take the right procedures in the right order, usually you can get out without too much difficulty. And especially if you've got a second vehicle, because you can always use that to tow yourself out. But yeah, here's the lads again, digging away merrily, and you might think that I'm a bit adverse to digging, because I don't think there's any shots of me ever doing any digging, but I can assure you that I did dig occasionally.
Right, keep the brakes up. Keep going. Go, 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 man, go, go. That way.
Well, I think the driver got the message. One of the other things that we obviously had to contend with was water. Now, fortunately, our guide obviously knew where various wells were, and he would go off in the daytime, drive however far he had to go to get the water. But on one occasion we did actually accompany him. So this is a quick look at the wells we were using, and we had to drink a lot of water. So one of the jobs throughout the day was constantly filtering water. And here's me doing something that I did 6-7 times a day. And it was just a constant water filter, water filter, water filter. Because if you didn't start putting it in, you'd end up under a tree laid on your back like I did earlier on. So, very important, hydration. Now finally, I'll just mention what it was like actually living out there. First thing every morning, regardless of whether we were moving or not, we had to pack all our kit away. And that was because we had to be ready to go at a moment's notice should there be a medical emergency or a weather-related emergency. The food, I could do a whole video about the food. Whenever we were preparing anything, it was covered in flies, and the meat that Aberdeen kept turning up with, it looked like a road accident. You'd think that the butcher had just gone absolutely mad with a machete. Bones, fat, gristle, don't even bear thinking about. And then there was the weather. The weather constantly battered us for several days, and from say 2 in the afternoon till 7 at night we weren't able to do anything. It was just a case of hanging on to the tent and the tarp. In fact, the tarp, in the end, on the last say 36 hours, we just gave up with that altogether, and we just sheltered behind the vehicles and behind that white tent. So it was pretty horrendous. We didn't get a shower all week. We were pretty ingrained with sand, and every time you got in and out of your tent, you got in quick with your boots on, because the whole area was covered with scorpions, and we actually saw how quick one of these could move, because it appeared between somebody's legs and promptly went about killing a camel spider. And that emphasised to everybody how careful you had to be to not leave any of your packs open, and make sure your tent was zipped up immediately you got inside it. So we also have a tent and sleeping bags and clothes just full of sand, which is why I look a bit grizzled when I suddenly appear on one of these clips we're going to see now. So let's enjoy the weather conditions, and then we'll come back and finish this off. So there we have it, a glimpse into life in the Sahara Desert. But it's not all dust storms and bad food. The place is absolutely stunning. The sunsets, the sunrise, it's a magical place and I love it. But one last thing to mention, before you start getting the idea this is a big macho man's type of trip, not the case. Because I keep talking about all the lads doing this, the lads doing a bit of digging there. There weren't just lads there. One of the ladies that was with us was just 2 or 3 years younger than me, and that would be Anne. And I would say that wherever there was any physical task to get involved with, she'd be one of the first ones there, picking up the shovel and getting stuck in. So yeah, you don't have to be a sprightly young chicken to go and do these things, you just have to be slightly mad.